Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network. Any opinions or comments made by any guest are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect any of the presenters or network's opinions.
It is my firm opinion that these sightings should be investigated most meticulously.
You don't believe that these flying saucers actually exist, do you?
And how can you be so certain they don't, Mr. Chop?
Well, I just don't believe it.
Our minds should be open on all subjects. Wrong conclusions are usually the result of lack of comprehensive analysis.
This is Sasha Christie, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for that introduction, Sasha. Now, Sasha will be back shortly to help me co-host this show. We will be talking to Caz Clarke, who's got an amazing incident to tell us about. Once again, thank you for all the communications you've been sending in. And if you would like to contact me, my email address is davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. That's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. Right. Now, just before I bring Sasha on, I'd just like to read a little bit out of a book. It's Flying Saucers Are Real by Fawcett Publications in 1950. Now, this book by retired US Marine Major Donald Kehoe was the first ever devoted to the flying saucer topic. It was essentially an expanded version of Kehoe's seminal article for True magazine under the same title. In this book, Kehoe states his main conclusions which define the modern flying saucer era. 1. The Earth has been under periodic observation from another planet, or other planets, for at least 2 centuries. 2. This observation suddenly increased in 1947, following the series of A-bomb explosions begun in 1945. 3. The observation, now intermittent, is part of a long-range survey and will continue indefinitely. There may be some unknown block to making contact, but it is more probable that the spaceman's plan are not complete. So with all that in mind, I will now bring Sasha on. Hi Sasha, welcome to the show.
Hi darling, how are you going on?
We're all doing alright here. The summer's here at last.
Yeah, it's been nice, hasn't it? I've had, been out in the garden.
It's superb, isn't it? It's lovely having a bit of sunshine.
Well, yeah, we've been inundated with, seaside UFOs recently.
Really?
Oh, wow. UFOs actually nested in my neighbour's roof, you know, the seagulls.
Oh, those type of UFOs, right, yeah. I get plenty of those as well.
We like mad and having fights. It's interesting actually watching them all scrapping with each other, but there was a castle that came, obviously looking for chicks and whatever stage they're at now.
Yeah.
Eggs.
They're noisy in the mornings, aren't they? I never had that where I used to live. But
yeah.
Because we've got seagulls now. It used to be pheasants where I used to live. Now I've got bloody seagulls.
That's it. We just have doves and magpies and crows and the little, the little birds. But recently, I think it's because our seaside resort bits, there's no tourism at the moment. No. So I think they've moved inland a little bit to look for food. No snacks being
left about all over the seafront, or the waterfront.
Where's my yeah.
Anyway, it's nice to have you on, Sasha, because we've got Caz Clarke on today. I know you're good friends with her, and I thought it'd be nice to have you and Caz on to have a good old natter. And as I was just saying to you, I don't know too much about this incident.
It's bonkers, David. It's bonkers.
The Pentrych incident.
I know why people struggle with it, but I've seen big stuff, so, you know, big stuff in Wales, so I'm kind of probably predisposed to believe her anyway, but, you know, I think the craft reminds me of something that was seen in 1980, you know, the Cashlandrum, like the pyramid type thing that was escorted by all the helicopters that actually went over the women and radiation burns and all that kind of thing. So that was December 1980, and what Caz has described, it just reminds me of that.
Yeah.
And I know that there's loads of pyramid UFO videos and things like that, but I've spoken to not only Caz, but one of the other witnesses. I was talking to her on the phone and she had me on speakerphone, and I didn't know, but there were other people in the room. So I was like, you know, it was one of the first times we'd talked, so I was kind of trying to reassure her about who I was, and you know, I didn't have an agenda. I'm just like you, basically. I've seen the huge thing that was just right in our faces in Wales. And I was telling them about what had happened to us, and then this other voice chimes in and starts telling me about his version of events, of the same events. So, you know, and the sincerity, everything, it's just not, they're not weaving a story. You know, it's like when I talk about my thing or whatever, you can go to any point in it and say something and, oh, no, that's not right, this, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's accessing memory, you can tell. I've talked to enough people now, and I've come into contact with enough liars and had a very good recent education on lies and things like that. And
I know. Tell me about it.
So that's actually come in handy for other areas, obviously. So, you know, I really do like this one, and I know that quite a few people that I know don't like it because it's too crazy and because Caz is too confident, and I don't think that's good enough reason, really.
I'm very intrigued to hear from, you know, first hand off of Caz, and it should be a pretty good show.
It will be, yeah. Great, she can hold her own.
Yeah, I'm sure she can. And I could just let you two go, and I'll go off and have a cup of coffee. Right. I was invite her in now, didn't I? Yeah, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hello, Caz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, good to be here.
It's a great pleasure to welcome you, and as you know, I've got Sasha on with me tonight. I know you know her fairly well, you've spoken to her before, and you know, I'm very intrigued in your case. I don't know it's your case, but the case that you talk a lot about, and Sasha's just put me right about my pronunciation of it. It's the Pentrych, the way it's pronounced, isn't it? The Pentrych incident.
Yes.
I've always called it the Pentrych incident because of the way it's spelt. You know us English.
Yes, indeed. Yes, Pentrych UFO incident.
Pentrych. Yeah. So tell us, Caz, how did you get involved? What happened?
Okay. Well, it started for me on Tuesday, the 23rd of February, 2016, when I noticed this very small grey twin propeller plane flying very low and very slow over my village. Well, to be honest with you, I didn't really pay it any mind because we got RAF St Athan 14 miles away, and we get RAF planes quite regularly. It was the next day, on Wednesday the 24th, when one of my neighbours came out of his house and he was cursing because this little plane had kept him awake all night. And it was then, really, that we started to notice the behaviour of this plane, and its flight pattern was a circle. And a bit later on that day, another plane, almost identical to the first one, turned up to take its place, and that continued the same flight pattern. Well, we wrote to the MOD, who didn't know anything about it. We wrote to Wales Online, our local mainstream news outlet, and they didn't know anything about it. And we decided, well, actually it was Wednesday night, that little plane kept me awake all night, because every 15 minutes, that's all you could hear was this prop plane flying over my house.
I know what that's like. I've had helicopters go over sort of at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not pleasant, is it?
No, not at all. And of course, when someone's pointed a sound out to you, that's all you can hear, and you kind of anticipate when it's going to come back. Well, Thursday daytime then, it was still there, and we all decided, my neighbours and I, that if it was still around that night, that we would go out and watch with it, because clearly they were watching for something. Now, David had said to me, that's my neighbour, perhaps they were watching for Russian planes. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it was only on the 18th of February that our RAF had turned away two Russian Tu-120 bombers from our airspace. So he was quite excited because he's a bit of a plane spotter. Anyway, we'd gone into my back garden, we'd lit the fire pit, and we were watching this plane that by now had started to fly figure-8 patterns, the closer it got to the time. I had no interest in UFOs whatsoever. If somebody had talked to me about UFOs, I'd have probably laughed back then. And it got to about 2 a.m. on Friday the 26th of February. And to be honest with you, I was freezing cold. I was just a little bit bored of watching this plane flying around. And I was just about to go back into my house when I heard what I thought was a missile coming. So I've run back out to the back of my garden and looked up, and there's huge planes flown over the top. And David has exclaimed, "Oh, that's an E-3 Sentry plane." Well, that meant absolutely nothing to me at the time. It's just a massive plane with this big mushroom type thing on its back. And that started to fly circles, not small circles. I mean, big. It took about 5 minutes for it to go around once. And I have to explain a little bit about where I live, because I live on top of a mountain and you can see in every direction but north, because that's where the actual mountain is. Anyway, the seventh time it went around, one red light, bright light, was visible high above the trees behind my house. So I shouted for Donna, one of my other neighbours who'd been watching with us that night, and she'd gone into her home to make hot drinks for us. I didn't get an answer, so Dave and I ran to the 5-bar gate just behind my house. And David had run into the field and I called him back. I didn't mind watching, but from a safe distance. I think if the military weren't there, we would have gone, you know. And this one red light turned into 3 red lights in a triangle formation. And it turned out that was the very pinnacle of a huge pyramid-type craft.
Wow.
The leading set of 6 lights on its underside, on the leading edge, were brighter than all the other lights, almost as if it was the steering mechanism somehow for this pyramid. It was 3-sided, it was turning very slowly anti-clockwise, and as it did so, it came down in a pendulum motion. And once it was in the upright position, it fired this really bright green object out of the top of it. Now, I can't tell you what shape it was because it was so bright, like a huge green star that just moved across and stopped above the trees to my left-hand side, just rocking backwards and forwards. The pyramid was still turning very slowly anti-clockwise and tilted on to the right a little bit, but moving backwards, almost back the way it had come, because this thing didn't come down from outer space. This thing came through into our dimension, if you like it came through a veil of some kind. And I stood on the 5-bar gate to get a better look through the bare trees and said to David, "It's landing, it's landing." And I was fixated on the bottom of it, and in actual fact, it wasn't landing. The field there rises to the north because it's the foot of the mountain. So the land was coming up to meet it. Anyway, it ejected what I described as a hand of lightning, but not thin lightning like we see, but thick, like fire, like fingers, came out, and the whole thing lit up really brightly, and still brighter on the right-hand side than the rest of it. But you could see that it was a solid craft and not a string of lights, for example. And it was then that I heard the 2 C-17 American propeller planes coming. Wingtip to wingtip, 2 of them flew over the top of me, and as I looked up to watch them go over, when I looked back, I couldn't see the pyramid anymore. And that's not to say it wasn't there, I just couldn't see it. And David said that he had seen 15 or 20, what he described as orbs, come out at the top of this pyramid. Well, I didn't see any of those, and I could lie to you and say that I did, but I didn't, because I was fixated on touching the ground, this thing touching the ground. That's the size of it, that from 200 yards away, whilst I was looking at the bottom, you couldn't see the top. So this thing was enormous. Anyway, there were 2 C-130 Hercules aircraft that had come in behind the 2 C-17s. And this green object that was above the trees moved really quickly and in front of these 4 aircraft and fired 3 really bright strobes at these planes, and then seemed to get excited somehow, and it was bobbing and weaving and bobbing and weaving, skipping away as the 4 planes were behind it, and it looked like a scene out of a movie. They were all bathed in this green light, and you could see all the outlines of the engines and the fuselages as these 4 planes pushed this green, or followed this green object towards Llantrisant. Well, after they'd gone out of sight, we were approached by 2, I can only describe them as barrel-shaped objects. They were both red in colour, about the height of a standard room or a small car. I want to say they were made of glass, but I don't know because I didn't touch them, but they were smooth on the outside, capped off with black caps on the top and on the bottom. They were red in colour, and they seemed to be moving inside. And I described it like white noise on a TV screen, but it was more than that. It was turning in on itself. And they were completely silent. There was no downdraft, no noise, no nothing. And one of them moved across, well, they were both coming across from my right-hand side. One had stopped above the hedge, just about 20 feet away from me and about 20 feet up. And I stared at it just for a few seconds because I wanted the details. I wanted to see. I'm just disappointed there wasn't more to see. But I'd looked to see then where the other one was, and the other one hadn't stopped. And by that time it was right over the top of us, and I'm standing on the gate. I had nowhere to go. David's seen them coming and had backed off, so he's standing over by the garages. And the only thing I could think to do was to wave. That had to be, for me, the universal symbol for, I don't mean you any harm. And this thing changed colour from tail light red to traffic light green. And I felt like I was scanned. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it was like something reached in and took the fear away from me. And this thing changed colour from, like I said, to green. And then both objects moved off in different directions.
So when you first saw it, did you think it might have been some sort of a military thing, or did you actually get it in your, a feeling that it wasn't?
Oh, absolutely, this wasn't, but they knew it was coming.
Yeah. No, mate, when you're on your first sort of, after seeing the small plane, did you think, oh mate, there's some sort of a military exercise going on, until you sort of decided otherwise?
Well, no, because no NOTAM had been issued at all for any exercise.
No, there would have been, wouldn't there? Yeah,
there was nothing, and the MOD certainly have contradicted themselves many times with the questions that we've asked them. There was a Freedom of Information request that we put in on the 10th of September 2018 when we asked about the planes that were circling here when there was no NOTAM issued for these dates, and the MOD told us that they held no information within the scope of our request. But we asked the same question on the 24th of October 2018. Please can you tell us why these planes, ZZ418 and ZG996, were flying in circles and figure 8 patterns in the Pentrych area between the 22nd of February and the 26th of February, and then we were told the information is withheld under Section 26, not in the public interest. So that's one contradiction, but there are many more, and this is on the public record on an official government document. Anyway, there was a huge explosion from the Llantrisant area, from the direction from where that green object was followed. And the explosion was so big that it registered on the Richter scale in Monmouth 40 miles away. The explosion was next to a hospital, and we sent a Freedom of Information request into the hospital, and they said that they had no prior knowledge. They knew nothing about it. Patients were physically shaken awake in their beds. We've had 2 members of staff come forward to say that there was so much smoke that it was coming in through the vents and through the windows and filling the corridors of the hospital. One member of staff went outside and he said there was so much smoke it resembled a foggy night. But there was a secondary explosion, again from witnesses that live in the Llantrisant area, that said that it sounded like something hit the ground. The first explosion was in the air. Well, an Apache helicopter, because there were 3 involved that night, out of the 20 gunships that were up that night, had to do an emergency landing just minutes after that explosion because its cockpit was on fire. The military did a meticulous metal search over Llantrisant Common, where they fired at this green object. We believe they used a brimstone missile. Again, we asked the MOD about this meticulous metal search that was carried out, and we were told again, Section 26, not in the public interest. I know. Well, because I didn't know about UFOs, and because I didn't know that you weren't supposed to talk about UFOs, when Wells Online put out the cover story that it was a military exercise, I put a comment on their page and said, well, you know, I can categorically assure you that was no exercise. What they were chasing were not planes. And Wells Online actually contacted me and interrogated me. It wasn't a friendly chat at all. They wanted to know who I'd spoken to and how exactly I had spoken to them. You know, was it on the phone? Was it texts, emails, chat boxes? They were very specific. And I was told to stay silent about it. So I did, for 18 months. This is, you know, whatever happened to me turned my hair white.
Wow.
Within 24 hours. And I do have video evidence to prove that. Because of the comments that were on Wells Online, that's what started my search at the other end to find out what had happened to this green object. And, you know, witnesses have said that there were helicopters circling for hours, there were troops on the ground, and they closed off all of Smilog Woods. Well, I didn't know where Smilog Woods was. We went to Llantrisant Common, we saw all the metal stacked up. I spoke to 2 dog walkers there that said that they heard the second explosion come from Smilog Woods. And when I asked where that was located, I felt quite small when they showed me this huge wooded hill that rises behind the Royal Glamorgan Hospital. Well, when you look at the wood from the hospital side, it resembles a giant W. But the right-hand valley is lower than the left-hand valley. And this is why I believe the green object was under some kind of intelligent control. That if it was incapacitated over the common and losing altitude, you want to be able to make that ridge on the right-hand side to clear the mountain. Unfortunately for them, whoever was flying that thing, there's another hill that rises behind it. And it's slammed into the trees there.
Oh.
We went up to Smilog Woods, and because I had an advantage in that I knew the trajectory of the green object, it wasn't long before we found the debris trail. And 60-foot trees had been snapped mid-trunk.
Good gracious.
Mid-trunk. And this debris field lay left and right of us in a perfectly straight line, as far as the eye could see. And we followed this debris trail through to its end. And for every tree that object hit, it would have slowed down. But it would have been an enormous amount of energy to have snapped one tree. But there were hundreds of trees that were snapped in half. Completely annihilated, you know, just exploded almost. And the impact site itself, there were 6 huge trees, again, that had been snapped mid-trunk. And these really bizarre like chemical burns, all the way around on the surrounding trees that had been left. And the burn marks were white, not black. And there was quite a pungent smell of burning rubber almost in the air at that location. Well, the Forestry Commission had felled all of those trees, and so we asked them why they did that. And they told us larch disease. Well, they got really strict procedures on how to deal with larch disease because it's such a harmful pathogen. You know, they have to wear coveralls on their feet and on their bodies. They have to wash their equipment. It has to be a licensed contractor to take this wood away and has to be burned. It can't be reused. And they have to leave the land free and fallow for a minimum period of 3 years. Well, what they did in Smilog Woods was nothing like that. Everything was left. They felled all the trees, but all the debris was left. And they replanted it. immediately they've replanted it. So that's not large disease. There was a place in Birmingham.
Someone would have had to order them to do that as well, wouldn't they?
Yes, yeah. Well, the military had closed off all the roads there. We asked the local government here if anyone had permission to do that. No one had permission to do that. People in Bather, in the neighbouring village to Llantrisant, couldn't even get out of their village because the police had closed all the roads. But of course, when we asked South Wales Police why they did that, it took them 3 years to get back to us. And when they eventually did, they said, the police officers involved, quote, no longer work for the police force. Well, if there was no incident, how do they know which police officers were involved? So they've either since retired or no longer work for the police force, which I thought was quite lame, to be honest. And I know they would have had to have brought officers into that area because there's normally just a sergeant and possibly 8 PCs that run the Llantrisant area. So for the number of police officers that were involved that night, they would have had to have brought them in externally. There was one lady that took her 3 hours to get back from Aberystwyth to Merthyr because every road that she had tried had been closed by uniformed police. And she was told that a lorry had overturned. And I think it was on the last road that she tried. And she said, well, it must be an awfully big lorry that can close every single road to the mountain. So it took her 3 hours. They closed the M4 motorway. And if you draw a straight line west from here, the section of motorway that they closed was the section that these objects would have gone over. We've got a witness there, or witnesses in Betws in Bridgend that saw military jets pursuing a cluster of green lights. So we know they saw them because they knew what colour they were. The investigation is still ongoing. We've got more Freedom of Information requests out again to South Wales Police. I can't tell you the content of that at the moment because I'm quite excited about what they're going to say. But the investigation is still ongoing. There's been a bit of backfilling by the hospital. I think they realised the seriousness of saying, well, we didn't know anything, when in actual fact they're now saying that they did. But we'll get to the bottom of that.
Wow. Well, Sasha, that kind of puts Rendlesham into shame, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
did you find weren't there some unusual magnetic readings in the area as well as Smilock Woods, or was that near your house?
That's right, yeah. Swansea UFO Network had tried to find me on Facebook and they were unable. I think Facebook had blocked me for some reason, but they put a blog up to say they were doing a sky watch on the Garth Mountain. I said it was a good place to be. That was all I said. And that was how they managed to contact me. And they came out because they wanted to log the sighting. They did some tests 18 months after the event. Gary Jones and Swansea UFO did some tests in the fields. The EMF was so high, it was the equivalent of being microwaved 18 months after the event. I mean, the morning of the incident, it was snowing in that field, but not in the surrounding fields. And the EMF trail is exactly the route that the pyramid took, which is also interesting, but the high EMF was also at the crash site. And this, again, is 18 months after the event.
This is another reason that it reminded me of the Castlundrum thing. Not only the shape of it, the colour of it, the size of it, but the radiation. Obviously, there was nobody damaged, but we don't know what would leave white instead of black soot, Did you ever find out what that piece of material was? Did it end up being a piece of coal?
I can't really talk about that at the moment, Slash. I can talk about the soldiers that came.
Yeah, I was say that, yeah.
We had some very strange men and women come and camp in the fields behind my house, and I didn't really notice that they were there because they'd camped behind this thicket of trees, and it was only through my local Pentrych hub that I knew they were there at all. And what tweaked my curiosity was that they'd given different stories as to who they were and what they were doing. One group had said that they were a fracking survey team, which didn't go down very well at all. And another group said that been told they were Vodafone. So of course I'd gone over there to find out who they were and to be a bit nosy really, and they told me they were Vodafone. But there were two guys in digital camos carrying real guns with live ammunition, and when we asked the Ministry of Defence on the 24th of October 2018, why were the soldiers carrying automatic weapons, that information is withheld under Section 26, not in the public interest. So only the military can hide behind Section 26, so we now know for sure they were military. They were doing a forensic search, wearing white forensic suits, in the field where the pyramid came in. Not where it went out, where it actually came in. I don't know exactly what they were looking for, because every time anybody walked past, they would all stand up and stop what they were doing and just stare at you until you were out of sight. It's the most bizarre and spooky thing I've ever seen in my life. But they were certainly searching for something. Hurry up, find it. So, whatever that means. But they didn't behave like civilians, even though they tried desperately hard to look like civilians. They weren't. All of their camps were perfect, and I've always said you can take the man out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the man. Every drawstring was perfect, the tents were perfectly aligned. It was a military camp through and through, and the equipment they were using, I've never seen anything like it before or since. They were using these laptop type devices, but they were twice the size of a normal laptop, and they were in a steel metal case, and they had 3 of those. And we actually think they were triangulating a satellite into this area. And we know this because after they left this little scrap of paper behind, and had the letters CSABA on them, and a partial Hungarian telephone number. And I thought CSABA must surely be the abbreviation for a company or something. But it's not. It's the name of someone. A Mr. Sasba Krasny, who just happens to be head of cybersecurity for the entire world. So not just here, Saudi Arabia, United States, China. This man actively goes around and employs hackers. So cybersecurity now has a completely different meaning for me, because I think they're listening here. And there was a guy, Richard Oliver, who runs a group called Paranormal now. He's been a paranormal investigator for over 20 years. And before this event, I would have probably just laughed it off, but now I'm completely open-minded, I have to be. And he took a group out to what we call the bald patch, where this hand of lightning came down, with a spirit box, and without any prompting, they said, whoever they are, your air agents are listening here. And one of them perished in the crash. This came through without any prompt at all from Richard or anyone. There is quite a lot of information that came through, but I found that extremely interesting, and kind of backs up really that they are listening in this location. I think, GPS and Galileo don't just tell you where you are. I think they have multiple functions. But yeah, it's
fascinating. As I say, it kind of puts Rendlesham to shame, really. You seem to have a lot more evidence and witnesses than involved in Rendlesham.
Well, there is potentially a third witness in the village, but he's a pilot, and he won't come forward for that reason.
Right.
I think it's quite common knowledge that they tend to get grounded if they say they see these things.
What about the policemen that were involved? Did you manage to track down any of those? If it was said that they'd left the force?
They won't give us any information at all, but I can say that I have spoken to a member of the military that was involved that night. And they were dragged out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and told to get on board a Chinook, and they had no idea what was going on. Okay. No, so this wasn't an exercise. For the number of assets they had in the air that night, this was in no way, no shape, no form an exercise. I don't know if you've ever been and seen a military exercise. A lot of people like to go and watch them, you know. On one day they might send a couple of planes up and do some parachute jumps in the afternoon. On another day they might fly around a couple of helicopters. But we had 20 gunships, helicopter gunships.
And that would have been noisy.
Yeah, we had aircraft up to 50 miles out. They exceeded the NOTAM that was eventually issued at 9 p.m. that night by over 50 miles. We had 2 E-3 Sentries, one of which belonged to NATO. The C-17s, the C-130s, other aircraft and a J-2 lifter, 3 Chinook helicopters on top of all of this, and all at the same time. They had enough firepower up there to take over a small country, let alone just chase down a UFO. Or several UFOs.
When you say the C-130, wasn't the AC-130, was it the gunship type?
I know them to be Hercules aircraft. The big Hercules.
Starlifters, you mean? David.
Sorry?
You mean the Starlifters?
Yeah, the ones with the guns at the side and they've got the radar on the front, because they're the ones I worked on.
I wouldn't.
Oh, right, okay.
To be honest, I'm not a plane spotter. I mean, it's David that we need to speak to about that. I just know that they were the big Hercules aircraft, because between the 2 Hercules aircraft and the 2 C-17s, they took up a really wide airspace when they were pushing or following this green object towards Llantrisant. And they did shoot it down. The Chinooks took something from Smilog Woods. They were flying backwards and forwards to Smilog Woods, taking something and taking it back to RAF St. Athan. And the little grey plane that was here for 3 days and 3 nights, along with its partner plane, had moved from here to Smilog Woods, and not just anywhere in Smilog Woods. It had dropped in altitude and airspeed and was now circling the exact impact site. And the other thing that we found to show that the military were on the ground there is I photographed some rather unusual tyre tracks. I've not seen them before. And they were like a barred type of track as opposed to a radial, you know, zigzag type thing. It was a flat barred track. And if you Google it, you know, what tyres are fitted to military vehicles, it will come up as a Tyrone run flat. And that is exactly the tyre tread that was left at the scene. So the military were on the ground there. People that lived on the outskirts of Smilog and people in the hospital heard gunfire in the woods. And again, no one had permission. The government hadn't given anybody permission to be in the woods or close the roads. But they definitely took something from there.
Well, they should be firing guns in the woods anyway, and anyone could be walking about in there, couldn't they, in public woods? So.
Yeah, and an exercise, a military exercise, they're not going to do it over the top. Something like that, they're not going to do it over the top of houses and hospitals in areas, in Wales, where there's so many areas where there's absolutely nothing. Why do it? Right. This doesn't make any sense at all.
Centrebridge is just up the road, and that's MOD land. So they could have used that quite easily. They were asked specifically, why did they choose this area? And they just said, well, because it has different land features. Well, no, it doesn't have any different land features to Centrebridge. It's exactly the same, you know. And to fire live ammunition excuse me, over a residential area is illegal. They can only do an exercise if they ask the landowner's permission. I'm pretty sure they didn't go around and knock everybody's houses. You know, they hovered their helicopters so low over people's houses that they cut people's trees off in their gardens. And I think it was done intentionally to hide the sound of the explosion. But the explosion was so big that it rattled people's houses and set all the car alarms off. And this is like 21 minutes past 4 in the morning.
I've got to say, they seem to have kept it, the whole incident, they seem to have kept it quite quiet and out of the media, because it's not something you hear too much about, is it?
What you'll find is a lot of evidence of absence. where the low-level flying exercises have all been removed for that period, for that week. Even the NASA's Live Watch thing, Earth Watch thing, again for the whole week, all been deleted. So they've gone around and removed an awful lot of stuff, really. But they tie themselves up in knots with the red tape, you know. Like I say, we do have a few more freedom of information requests waiting to come in. You know, we asked them why local residents weren't told about this officially, and the MOD holds no information within the scope of our request. And yet this is supposed to have been an exercise.
Indeed. I was quite intrigued when you said about it seemed to come from another dimension, rather than outer space, as you put it.
Right.
Is that the way? Is that your feeling that maybe it come from another dimension?
Absolutely. I saw this thing emerge through a black veil. I described it a bit like approaching a vehicle in fog, and initially you see two headlights and you think, oh, it's a car. And as you get a little bit closer, so you see some lights around the cab and you think, oh, no, it's a truck. And then, you know, as you go past, you realise, oh, no, it's the Coca-Cola truck, you know, that thing. This thing came through something, turned and went back the way it came. And someone suggested perhaps it decloaked. I don't think it would have in the middle of a military ambush, because they set an ambush for it. And if it was cloaked, why didn't it stay cloaked?
Yeah.
It seemed to materialise gradually. That's another term, I suppose.
Yeah. I do seem to hear that a lot on these shows, that they do, when I've seen it myself, when things just appear, they kind of just disappear again. Like you say, I don't know if it's a cloaking mechanism, which I'm sure they must have anyway, or if it's just the way they're travelling. Maybe they've got some scientific way of travelling that we don't know about yet.
Well, I've seen something just disappear. The friend, it was like three lights. It was swinging out from behind a cloud and then swinging back behind the cloud. I've been looking at it for quite a while before I thought, hang on a minute, that's not normal. And it sort of slowly, like a feather, you know, like a feather falls and it goes left to right.
Yeah.
It was doing that much.
Well, that's how Caz described it, coming down, didn't it? Like a pendulum motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And the green object was also swinging from side to side.
Because this just was swinging from side to side, but it wasn't coming down. It was doing that motion, but staying at the same height. Right. And as we were looking at it, it just vanished. Just literally, like, it was there and then it wasn't. And it was bizarre.
We found out a bit more interesting information. Gary was in contact with a man that runs Skyhub. And I've written to him. He's French, so I wrote to him in French as well. I'm still waiting for an answer. But Gary said that this gentleman had said that during the week before the incident and during the incident, something very, very strange happened to the magnetic sphere. And it flatlined, but on that night it became inverted. Whatever that means, I have no idea. But these magnetic anomalies seem to be appearing now all over the planet.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I'm wondering if that's how they knew they were coming. But I think they might be part of the Sagittarius galaxy, which actually exists in the same space as we do, but is only visible in infrared. And I've done a little bit of research, and scientists can actually prove that we were all part of the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy millions of years ago. And when it collided with the Milky Way, we became separated. But coincidentally, it just crosses on Earth. So it could be that they're from Sagittarius and that they actually exist in the same time and space as we do, which is why they seem to appear and disappear when really, you know, BBC Two, if we're on BBC One, BBC Two exists at the same time.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's all layers. I think I see it all as like layers of frequency, like we had in the old analog style, like kids probably wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, because it's all digital now. But, you know, you've got those bands of frequency,
Yeah.
And, I think that exists in not just audio, but, in a visual sense as well. We can see very, very little of our actual environment.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned frequency, Sasha, because something had changed in that, what I call the ball patch field where the pyramid was, because it was snowing. And as you know, frequencies can create snowflakes.
Yeah.
And it was, I felt like a kid standing on the edge of the field watching the snow fall in front of me, but not on me, And it was also snowing at the crash site, but nowhere else. And we have video of that as well.
It snows around airports as well, because of fuel, the jet fuels.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more cloud and a lot more and snow from the fuel itself. It causes it. So there are things that can happen in the atmosphere that will make it snow, and they are like chemical based.
Yeah, but something very strange happened in that field. I mean, we walked all around the entire perimeter of the field in all of the other fields, and it wasn't snowing, just in that one field, which was bizarre because I've never seen anything like that. And I did have PTSD for a long time, and thank you, Sasha, for your wise words when you said it is a process. You're absolutely right. It is a process. But I do feel like I'm coming out the other side. I look back at how I'm still angry, and challenging I still am, I suppose.
I'm the same. I can totally relate to you. When I got to the UFO community, I thought, they'll have all the answers and nobody knows nothing. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
What
We're all no experts.
For all these years, I'm doing something about it. I'm doing something about it. How many people have been doing something about it? Millions, probably. And where are we?
Yeah. Well, I've been threatened by the military. After Swansea published the story, they came out and visited me. They contacted me via my Facebook and said they had an interest in the case. And I'd met quite a lot of people. I'm not foolish enough to go out on my own. And they threatened me with perhaps a fatal car accident, which extended to my family. And that was what compelled me to come forward. And I chose then not to remain silent anymore.
That's outrageous. They actually threatened that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I had lots of trouble with the police. So it's like your life becomes disrupted.
Yes.
But, there's all these people out there think that they're getting harassed because they posted edgy stuff on Facebook. But it's not that. It's when you're out there being a total gobshite, like we are, and no, we won't back down. And no, you won't derail me, because this is real. This actually happened, and you need to know about it. You need to wake up, and all you care about is intellectualising everything. Well, it's totally taken away from the actual point, I mean, recently we've had some photographs and footage come out, and there's loads of people there. The planes, or, whatever, the George Knapp photos I've seen. I've not seen the photo, I've only seen a few that Jeremy Corbell's, released, and the footage of those triangular shaped things. Well, I mean, I don't know, they could be jets. They do have that kind of shape to them, but why would they all be so swarming so close? I don't know. The behaviour doesn't
the video.
right.
I concur with you.
I don't know. For it to be a plane, it'd be going in one direction. I'm just I'm not throwing it out of the window.
I've analysed the footage, and if they are aircraft, they're flying backwards because these triangles are turning
just not like.
But the pyramid was real. That was real. And that was in 2018.
Then, I've got this other thing going on where it's like, well, if we believe that there's a secret space program and that we have got more advanced technologies, are we seeing stuff that is actually ours? And they want us to believe it's theirs. That I always have that ticking over in the back of my head.
I know what you mean.
I have to say that even what we saw, they could have been the military something, they could have been testing out technologies. They were so far away from us, and it was like they saw us from all that way away. And this thing was huge, but when we could see it, it looked tiny in the clouds. From all that distance away, it vectored in on us.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe they were testing technology. Why would they do that to us? Why, why not just do it to some cattle instead of people? Why terrorize loads of people? You don't have to terrorize people to have a UFO illusion. If you've got those kind of crafts, you just need to fly them around. You don't need to terrorize people.
Right.
Just doesn't make sense. And what was running around us? I don't know what it was. I can't say that I saw anything. I know it wasn't the sheep because they were all lying down, and sheep run away from people not to. So, and where we were in a closed off garden. There were no sheep in there anyway. Something ran up behind me and it bumped into me. This is not attention seeking. Why the hell would we expose ourselves to the kind of attention that this brings? Either sycophantic, I mean, I'm not saying everyone's sycophantic, but you do get them creepy weirdo types who are just sort of latching on and, but, I mean, we've got a lot of good supporters, but there's so many people out there that will believe in the phenomena but not believe the people who say it. Or they just take a disliking to somebody and they will make it their life's mission to make that person's life a living hell for no good reason other than they're defending their own decisions of what they believe, their critical thinking, their beliefs. They're not defending anything other than that. They're not defending any people. They're defending their thought processes. Yeah, and that's what you're dealing with. And some of them are literally insane. The amount of times I've been told to kill myself. And that was nothing to do with any of the investigation or anything that I've done. Just for being me. Yeah. Just for saying, being an outspoken woman, which we still have a massive misogyny and ufology. Yeah. So that's what we're up against.
I agree with you completely that we do have advanced technology, but on this particular night, with the vehicles that I saw, were not ours because we wouldn't have shot down one of our own. Yeah. And those barrels, whatever they did to me, they changed my electrodermal wave. I have a signal inside of my body. And as for the skeptics and cynics,
what about your lie detector test, your polygraphs?
Yeah, that's how it was discovered. There's a signal inside of me because I didn't know. And
you passed them?
I passed 3. Yes.
Sorry, can you Caz, can you explain that? What do you mean a signal inside of you?
Exactly that. I have a signal, an emitting signal inside my body.
So are you suggesting that maybe you've got an implant of some kind? Is that?
I'm not suggesting anything because I didn't know, but I have lost an hour and a half.
Sorry, I'm not implying anything. I just wondered. That's what I was going to come to. Do you think you may well have been abducted at some point?
I've lost an hour and a half in time. I don't know what happened. That scares me more than anything because it was only after I met Gary and he'd already established the military timeline and realising then that the explosion didn't happen until 4:21. This incident started at 20 to 3 in the morning. For us, we were only out at the gate for maybe 10 minutes maximum and then came back to my house. So where did that hour and a half go? Because when we got back to my house, that's when there was the huge explosion. And we saw the 3 Apache helicopters going across the field in the direction of the green object to intercept it. And we could only see 2 after that. Because the 3rd one had to do an emergency landing at Cardiff. But to know that that explosion went off at 4:21, there's an hour and a half missing time. This whole thing scares me.
That's very intriguing.
But, every soldier in World War I and II were afraid, but they went forward anyway because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And this is the right thing to do. Every human being on this planet needs to know that this is going on. And the military now seem to think that we're in the way. They tried to move me on when they were here, you're trespassing. No, I don't need permission to be here. That's a public footpath, They serve us, and they forget that. They serve us. And now suddenly we've become incidental. We're in the way. If they had their way, everybody would be military and there wouldn't be any civilians. But they can't keep this secret. You know, this involves everybody on the planet. And there should be an open debate about it. Because I'm not saying that there aren't some out there that are hostile, because clearly there are. I think Senator Richard Blumenthal said it best in the Senate hearing for Space Force to General Dunford recently, in April last year. But what happened here, they were not hostile, but they shot them down anyway. There needs to be a public debate about this, and the people have a right to know. It scares the life out of me.
Alfred Lemberg wrote a book called Shoot 'em Down. That was policy in the USA, based on some documents that he found. The book is called Shoot 'em Down, Alfred Lemberg.
I know they were targeting radar on them back in the 1940s and 50s, and that was bringing them down. But, you know, to shoot something down without first establishing any form of communication at all, no hand of friendship, nothing. They set a military ambush, pursued it, and shot them down without mercy. And it was like both sides knew what to expect. I think the bright green object was a decoy of some kind to draw those aircraft away from the pyramid craft and the load that it had jettisoned. And whether they were probes or intelligent life forms, I don't know. But I didn't see any of Spielberg's funny-looking aliens, you know.
No.
Karen Cooper describes in the V-shaped, the delta-shaped craft that he saw, which was just like, you know, the black V with white lights, but independent in between the wings of this thing was a red ball. And he said it was like it was alive. It was undulating and moving inside.
Yeah.
And it had kind of like speckles in it, like you were saying, white noise.
Yeah.
And my kids had like a slime app on the phone, which is absolutely ridiculous. You know, when they were all the slime phase, they were all wanting to play with this slime all the time, but all these apps came out, so you played pretend slime. Yeah, great. But anyway, so my daughter sat there and she was messing about with this thing, and I thought, oh my God, I wonder, because it was a circle shape, like it was in a tin. So I took the phone off her and I had a little mess about with it, and I went and got a red colour because his was red, and I messed about with it and I was moving it around, and I had a record your screen app on my phone, so I recorded it, and I did this swirling thing with the slime inside, and I sent it to him and totally spun his head out because it was almost exact. So he got the app and he's done some stuff with that, but yeah, so it's just interesting. And I recently saw somebody saying the similar thing in ET UFO Hunters group in Facebook, but I can't remember who or what exactly. But it was it was, you know, good comparison. Yeah. So, you know, there's these little independent, smaller but not small things that seem to be alive and are moving intelligently.
Living machines, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they seem to be intelligent.
Yeah, I think the only comforting thing you can find out of what that story you just told is the fact that we had the capability to shoot it down. You know, because normally you think
the whole of Europe want the brimstone missile because it goes through anything. You know, you don't get to my age and then suddenly decide, oh, you know, I'm going to make up a UFO story. You know, because I have no idea. I've always had quite high-powered jobs, shall we say, or managerial positions, and so I've always kind of had some form of control. But after that happened to me, I felt like a little kid lost in the world. I didn't know who to speak to, who to turn to. I wasn't a member of any groups. I wish I'd known someone like Sasha and yourself.
Yeah, it must have completely just just turned you upside down, I imagine, if you didn't believe in them in the first place.
Completely. I even believed that there were UFOs in the sky. Didn't really give much thought to why they were there or what was in them or anything, but I'd seen one with my mum when I was about 12, so I was just sort of didn't really think about it that much. But then, you know, when I started seeing Steve and he shared a house with this guy, John, who was literally obsessed with UFOs, so we would go sky watching because of John. And then, ironically, we go away to Wales, and this massive thing happens.
Yeah, there you go. That's weird, isn't it? It's like you brought it on.
It's weird, no, because it was like John was the one who was always going on about it, and then he missed out. It was just all of it, everything about it was so messed up. So messed up.
I think they choose us.
And honest to God, you just can't imagine how much it devastates you as a person, your personality, your everything, your likes, your dislikes, your, knowledge of what the world is and your place in it. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Like in an instant. It's not even overnight. It's like immediate. Like,
absolutely.
The world is not, oh my God, these things can just come in and go and do whatever they want, and nobody's paying any attention or doing anything about it. And it was so massive, and it was there for so long, and we were just like, what the hell is life after that? All of us were just like, just still now.
You question everything, don't you?
24 years now.
Everything.
And 24 years, and we're still completely blown away by it, because it was so in your face, so big, so outrageous, just so stupidly outrageous. And you hear yourself telling it, and you're like, I sound like a crazy person. But this is the truth, and I'm going to tell it, and I can't help myself. I always hate the way that I get, and I get so up my own arse sometimes, and so agitated by it all, and I think, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. Why am I even bothering? What's it doing for me? It's nothing positive. It's just destruction and destruction and destruction.
You're informing people something.
Nowhere. It doesn't feel like, well, it doesn't feel like that to me. I'm just here, like, repeating myself endlessly, and it goes nowhere. But now Steve's come forward. You know, he's with Gary. We're going to be doing a video, so he's going to do his investigation thing. Because after seeing the investigation that he did with you, Caz, and the Denby Lights one, when he said to me, "Can I do my thing?" and with your incident, and I was like, absolutely. Because he thinks of so many things that I just would not even consider. Yeah,
it's the aspersions in him.
And the determination and the dogged way that you two have just F away at you, fire, all the time.
Yeah, I'm still ongoing, but we've still got some waiting to come back in now.
This is not you, it's attention seeking. You know, and asking wily questions that make the, the MOD or whoever say these things to you, not in the public interest. It means there's something's
going on, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So by doing this.
7 times, I can't say they lied, 7 times they'd contradicted themselves.
Yeah.
To be a good liar, you have to have a good memory, and clearly they're too bone idle to read the previous FOIs, and so they're making it up as they go along. You know, that clearly shows a cover-up, and I know they've covered it up to go to the trouble of coming out here and threatening me.
The thing is, the thing that people listening now don't know is that this is not just you and Gary doing this. You have regular meetings in the local area where more and more, every year, more and more people are coming forward and saying that they heard this, they saw that. It's not just you and David. There's so many people now in the area that are coming forward and saying, well, this is what I experienced. And it's either the noises, the smoke, all of that. That's, it's not just coming from you.
No. I'm the only one to come forward, and because they forced me to come forward. And like I've always said, I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to inform you. This happened. Do with the information whatever you want. But I will get to the bottom of this. I will not stop.
Well, you want to know what's going on.
Well, absolutely. I saw what they did. I was there. But who were these people, for want of a better word? Why did they shoot them down? Because they didn't harm us, and they had every opportunity to harm us.
And also, if you're emitting a signal of some kind, you want to know why and what happened.
Yes, and I want to know about the hour.
Poorly after that, weren't you? People don't know.
Yeah, and it was little things at first, Sash, to be honest, you know, like becoming, I'm a super sensitive now. I was never a super sensitive before. Being allergic to the coatings on certain tablets, that didn't bother me before. Becoming anaphylactic, I was never that before. And so you get this little build-up now of little things that are happening to you. And then New Year's Eve going into 2017, I nearly died.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the radiation, or the EMF, or something that this thing did to me. I don't know. But it clearly has done something to me, so much so that my polygraph examiner was physically shaking when she read my polygraph statement for the second time. Because the first time she read it, each time she read a paragraph, she would impress upon me that this had to be accurate. You know, I had cameras all over me in that room. I think it's an intimidation tactic to ensure that you're telling the truth. And so she read it briefly, and then after each paragraph again, she would say, if you've exaggerated, it will come out to be a lie, you know. You have to be 100% accurate. I said, well, I am. And then after, when I took the 3 tests, and I passed 3 times, and she read it again, her hands were shaking. And she said, is this going to go to the mainstream news? And I said, well, I don't know. She said, well, I don't care if it does. She said, just give me a heads up. I said, fine. So, and she is a forensic polygraph examiner. Now, my results had to be sent to a panel, because they tell you anyway if you've passed or failed. And the equipment that they got, I know that people will say, well, you know, some people can beat a lie detector, etc. But, you know, our government use them on their staff quite regularly, so they must be fairly accurate, you know, and you must be pretty military trained or take drugs or something to be able to beat these things. Well, I had to have medical before I took my polygraph exam. There were a lot of hoops I had to jump through. I couldn't be on medication.
That's right.
You know.
There's quite a few checks they do first, isn't there? And it's also the important the questions that are asked as well.
Oh, definitely. But, you know, I have kept her name out of the mainstream at the moment, but I don't think she's got a problem with me telling anyone anymore. So, you know, she is a qualified forensic polygraph examiner that works for a fairly large firm in this country. You know, it was a hard thing to get because other companies I'd approached, when they found out the subject matter, they refused to test me. In fact, one examiner actually threatened to fail me before he'd even tested me. You know, you're not going to get the answers you're looking for. Well, why?
How does he know?
Exactly.
Or she.
Exactly.
That's weird.
Just know what the world is. They just know. And I used to feel like I knew. Now I know nothing.
Now I question everything. Everything
I
else
don't
I
know what I am. I don't even know what it is to be a human being, like on this soggy pebble that's hurtling round a ball of fire zooming through space. In spiral vortex, you know what I mean? Like, what? That's where we live, and we're arguing.
And then we're something living in a lump of meat.
You know, it's just nuts. Like, life is completely bonkers, so I don't know why people get their head boggled by the fact that there might be other life. I mean, you look at all the life that's on this planet, there's billions and billions of life forms on this planet.
That's what I find crazy. People can't believe in life on other planets. You've only got to look at life on this planet to see how many different types there are.
Well, I think in the last 2 years we've been told about more Earth-like planets than we've ever been told about. Well, if they're Earth-like, how Earth-like do they have to be to sustain life?
Yeah, well,
You know,
it's just
we also
we
have a saying in science, where there is water, there is
it's life. Yeah.
Yes.
And we're just a speck of dust as well.
Really, really hot.
I think the more we learn about space, the more ridiculous a notion it is that we are alone.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course. Yeah, I agree entirely. Have you ever thought about having a regression, Caz?
I'd love to, but it scares the hell out of me, to be honest with you, David. You know, not knowing scares me, but do I want to know?
Yeah, like that. I don't think that I can be hypnotised. I am far too, like, rigid with it. It's like I'm still completely frozen in time.
Yeah. I'm the same, you know. Funny enough, we were talking about this on the show last week when I did one with Juliet and Kieran. Funny enough, we were talking a bit about hypnotism, and I said I couldn't be hypnotised, and she said, "Oh, you can." She says anyone can be. So whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because, you know, how can they take you back to a place that you don't really want to go? Even if you're sort of curious, you really don't want to go. If your whole inside of you got that ego bit that's, you know, always chewing things over, shoulda, shouldn't. You know, the core of you inside that knows better than you do.
And of course, there's always the notion that perhaps if they regress you, are you going to a dreamscape type of place? Are you recalling a memory, or are you making it up?
Exactly.
You know,
no, I said exactly that same thing last week, because I've actually been on a regression with somewhere that was fairly near where I used to live, and I paid them like £60 fee to do a regression, and I got to a point I wasn't sure if I was making this up because I had to come up with some sort of result, or I was actually doing it, you know, because I was actually aware of everything that was going on, and I felt that I had to come up with some sort of result, and I think it was just coming out of my own imagination, if you like.
Yeah,
you know.
Exactly. That's why I have to stick with what I know, what I saw, and all the research that's been done. I mean, 5 years down the line, the EMF has now disappeared, which shows that it was an unnatural signal that was in that field. Yeah. We're having the radiation. Edmund Williams from Swansea UFO had a Geiger counter, and 18 months after the event, he tested those fields and got some quite high radiation readings. And no one in the club actually was able to find out or knew how to read this Geiger counter. So we've got the results, and Gary has sent them off to the nuclear people in Britain, and they're going to send him a report on those results. So we'll find out soon how dangerous the radiation was 18 months after the event. But that's coming from the nuclear people in Britain. So that's another one that we're waiting for now.
Well, it sounds like we might be doing a follow-up show in a few months, then, Caz.
Well, yeah, because there's more and more I won't let this go.
No.
You know, Gary's a fantastic investigator. It's because of his Asperger's, you know, as a red rag to a bull. Leave a stone unturned. You know, we still want to go out and do a metal search on Llantrisant Common, because they had just a couple of hours in which to pick up all the metal on that common, including old bikes and washing machines, you know.
Yeah.
But they had to do it under the cover of darkness. And I don't know what it is, but, you know, maybe they missed something. We don't know. I'm also trying to track down a security guard who was working that night. And this is a bit of new information. He was working in some disused warehouses that were in front of the Royal Glamorgan Hospital, opposite the Royal Mint, on night patrol. And even though they were disused, they still had to be guarded. And he said he saw something wedged into the side of the building that was not of this world, and the military took it. So that would be interesting, because I really want to speak with him. And coincidentally, it just happened to be the same buildings that the police decided to use for their counter-terrorism drill in June of the same year. So the plot thickens.
It does. I'll tell you what, maybe later in the year we could get you and Gary on the show, and perhaps we could have a catch-up and find out what's happened. You know, if you do catch up with anything by then.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm just waiting for the response now from South Wales Police. I've already got my next FOI lined up. You know, I was looking for a specific question that was asked of the Ministry of Defence on a Freedom of Information, and I couldn't find the answer. And I was saying to Gary, where is it? Because they seem to have answered everything. So I had to go through them all, and there's quite a lot of them now. And they just literally just skirted over the question completely.
As I do, yeah.
Didn't bother answering it, you know, like, oh, that doesn't exist. And it was about why they lied, about why they were here. And it's a question they can't answer, because by admitting that they lied, that they used a cover story, means that it was a covert operation. And if it was a covert operation, it means it's a real situation and not an exercise. So, we've got them anyway, because, you know, they were carrying live ammunition, even though it's not in my interest as a member of the public. I don't know what they were looking for, but it was something serious enough for them to be wearing forensic suits, so as not to contaminate themselves.
Well, anyone decided to walk their dog in the woods that night, they'd take their lives in their hands, wouldn't they?
Oh yes, indeed. We had an RAF veteran that was in the hospital on that night, and he doesn't know whether or not he's still under the Official Secrets Act, so he wouldn't speak to us directly, but his daughter did. And he said he heard gunfire. He was physically shaken in his bed. That's how violent the explosion was. The Ministry of Defence's explanation for the explosion was that it was a fake incendiary device. But I'm yet to see them place one in the air, because that's where the explosion came from. And it only registered on the Richter scale because the hospital shook, because it has multiple subterranean levels. And it shook the hospital down to its foundation. It's an enormous building. And to have registered on the Richter scale 40 miles away is some explosion. You know, that's not
going on. Why would there be any kind of incendiary device?
Well, you know, that was their explanation. When the police did their counter-terrorism drill in June of 2016, I think they rely on people's memories fading. When people look back for an exercise, they think, oh, but yes, we were told. And that's what Gary got hooked up on initially, was the exercise that was done by the police in June of 2016. And they were letting off fake incendiaries that don't have any kinetic energy at all. I mean, I've seen more smoke off a firework, you know, little cap guns, in a fenced off area, so it didn't exceed that area. But what happened on the 26th of February exceeded the NOTAM by 50 miles. I mean, it came from here, through Llantrisant, through Port Talbot, Neath, Swansea, out to sea, directly west of here. You know, I jokingly say, well, what were they waiting for me to drop my hanky to start their multi-million-pound operation with aircraft 50 miles out that couldn't have even seen me? Yeah, I could pinpoint the time that everything started because I was there. You know? So,
intriguing.
Very. And serious too, because if they are shooting these things down without provocation, and these particular ones were not hostile in my mind's eye, what have we done? You know, there are some, as Senator Richard Blumenthal said, that there is a growing threat in space. And if the American people knew, there would be some great concern. I think Donald Trump said that alliances have changed when he announced Space Force publicly. So something in recent years has changed. And of course then you've got Jean-Claude Juncker, the leader of the EU, standing up in front of the whole of the European Union saying how he'd just come back having had the meeting with the leaders of other planets.
Well, yeah.
Not countries, planets.
You said what?
He stood up in front of that.
Juncker.
Yes, Jean-Claude Juncker stood up in front of the whole of the EU and said he had just come back having had the meeting with the leaders of other planets. So that is the literal translation to what he said. Not countries, planets.
I wonder if there's a YouTube link to that. I'll have to have a search for that.
Yeah, I think there probably is. Yeah. You'll find it. It's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like you to come back on the show later, if maybe September sometime, with you and Gary. Caz?
Yeah, that would be
with
fantastic.
with a fantastic update of what's been going on, and you too, Sasha, if you want to come back on, and it'd be good to.
Yeah, get Gary on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Caz and Gary would be great. Cause,
and Sasha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, well, just before you go then, Caz, have you thought about writing a book?
Oh my goodness, lots of people say that to me.
Well, I think you should.
You know, if I was articulate enough, I probably would, but I haven't got the time. I've got a family.
Yeah, I know.
And a house to run. It's not that easy. And Sasha will probably testify to that. When you've got children, it's all go for the kids, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think I am literate enough to write a book, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think we all think that though, but I think you can always get someone to help you with that, can't you? You know. And I think you're pretty literate myself. It's, you know.
Yeah, very articulate. Yeah.
Well, I try, but.
I mean, even if you did it by recording, you know, even if you don't sit down and actually write it, you could actually speak it and get someone to kind of type it out for you, if you like.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
That'd be good.
Okay, right. Should we we'll leave it there then, Caz? And it's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's been a great pleasure, and I've learnt quite a lot today, and it's going to make me sort of research a little bit more about this incident, because it's it's really sort of raised my interest.
Well, to be honest, I really thought that someone would have seen something like I had seen, you know. But to find out that no one has outside of the military is quite worrying, really.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Also, sort of typical. It's really typical. You know, we all seem to see something different, but in the same, you know, apart from the people who've seen the triangle UFOs, but. And there's varying descriptions of those, isn't there? But we all see something different.
Yeah, I've only ever seen an orange oval object, nothing like a triangle.
Yeah.
Well, I think Richard Oliver and Paranormal Now has just published a video of some of the UFOs that have been filmed here in Pentrych in the last 5 years. So, by me. So there's a few on there for you to have a look at. But absolutely fantastic talking to you guys, and especially you, Sasha.
Yeah, good to chat to you. Yeah.
I'm pleased I've learned how to pronounce it properly now. So. Right. Yeah. Okay then. Right. Thank you very much, Caz and Sasha, for joining me.
Oh, thank you, David.
It's been a great pleasure, as always. And I shall look forward to the next time. So, so until then, thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.
Yeah, bye, Caz. Thank you, and you, Sasha. Cheers. Thanks for coming on. Cheers. Bye bye. Right, you've been listening to Paranormal Dimensions on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm David Young. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Bye bye.
For me, this is the kind of show that I like doing most, where you basically just have a freewheeling discussion, have a chance to go off on topics. That's what's going to make you an outstanding player in the field. Just keep doing it.
Unidentified flying objects, commonly known as flying saucers, do exist. Some kind of flying objects have been photographed in the sky. If they cannot be identified as objects known to man, what are they? If they are not man-made, who made them? If they are not from this planet, where are they from?
Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.